Thousands of apps are spying on you, and we now have insight into how bad it really is. Apple automatically opted users into AI analysis, Proton had a major outage, and much more. It was an exciting week. Welcome to Surveillance Report 209, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past week. I am Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is listener supported. We cannot do this without you guys. Your contributions are what allow us to keep going, to pay for the hosting, pay for the subscriptions we need to do this work, reimburse ourselves for the time spent, collecting these stories and taking notes and editing and all that stuff. So if you would like to help keep this podcast going, there are several ways to do that. We have Patreon, where in return you can get access to a Signal group chat with other supporters. You get an ad-free segment that is also expanded to include our analysis and our opinions of these stories. You also get to join our Q&A, which comes out midweek. If you prefer something recurring, but you do not want Patreon, we do have LibrePay. Per the terms of service, we cannot give any rewards for LibrePay, but it is an easy way to support us on a recurring basis, and we do appreciate that. And then we also have Monero. You can contribute directly. That is the most private and anonymous way to do it. Or if you still want to get something in return, we have XMR Chat, where you can tip us in Monero, and you can ask a question in return that we will include on the Q&A. And then we just had one quick announcement in case you guys missed the news. Odyssey has decided to discontinue their YouTube autosync feature. Apparently, it's become too difficult for them to maintain. We try to keep things as automated and simple on this end as possible to streamline the process as much as possible so that we can be consistent as much as possible with you guys. Therefore, it really doesn't make sense for us to manually upload to Odyssey and manage that. The PeerTube instance currently does work and automatically syncs, so we have decided that the simplest path forward would be simply to discontinue Odyssey. Apologies to all the Odyssey users. If you want a way to access these videos that is not YouTube, they're still over on PeerTube.
Not to diss on Odyssey, because I do think it has a lot of improvements over YouTube, but PeerTube is, well, I guess Odyssey was ad-free as of recent as well, but there are no analytics or anything, and we host those videos on PeerTube ourselves. So it's actually, in a lot of ways, a step up in terms of privacy and data sovereignty and stuff like that. So, yeah.
And also, PeerTube actually, I think with version 7 that just came out like a month or two ago, they had a pretty nice visual interface overhaul. So up until now, it's looked really dated, but this new update is actually really clean and really nice. Definitely check it out. With that, we'll move into our highlight story, and we have a big one this week. This comes from Wired. It's actually 404 Media has some sort of arrangement with Wired where every once in a while they post an article on Wired, and it's also on 404, but I think the 404 version is paid. So if you're a paying subscriber, you can also find this on 404, but it should be more or less the same article, and the Wired one is not paywalled, so we're including that one here. Anyways, the headline says, Candy Crush, Tinder, MyFitnessPal, see the thousands of apps hijacked to spy on your location. Some of the world's most popular apps are likely being co-opted by rogue members of the advertising industry to harvest sensitive location data on a massive scale, with that data ending up with a location data company whose subsidiary has previously sold global location data to US law enforcement. The thousands of apps included in the hacked files from location data company Gravy Analytics. Side note, I was talking with my wife about 10 minutes before we started recording, and I mentioned Gravy Analytics, and she just gave me a look and goes, Gravy? I love these companies have weird names. Anyways, they include hacked files from location company Gravy Analytics, include everything from games like Candy Crush and dating apps like Tinder to pregnancy tracking and religious prayer apps across both Android and iOS. Because much of the collection is occurring through the advertising ecosystem, not code developed by the app creators themselves, this data collection is likely happening without users or even app developers' knowledge. This data provides a rare glimpse inside the world of real-time bidding, or RTB. Historically, location data firms paid app developers to include bundles of code that collected the location data of their users. Many companies have turned instead to sourcing location information through the advertising ecosystem, where companies bid to place ads inside of apps. But a side effect is that data brokers can listen in on that process and harvest the location of people's mobile phones. Included in the hacked Gravy data are tens of millions of mobile phone coordinates of devices inside the US, Russia, and Europe. Some of those files also reference an app next to each piece of location data. The list includes dating sites Tinder and Grindr, massive games such as Candy Crush, Temple Run, Henry's favorite Subway Surfers, and Harry Potter Puzzles and Spells. Transit app Move It, My Period Calendar and Tracker, a period tracking app with more than 10 million downloads. Popular fitness app MyFitnessPal, social network Tumblr, Yahoo's email client, Microsoft 365's Office app, and flight tracker Flight Radar 24. The list also mentions multiple religious-focused apps such as Muslim prayer and Christian Bible apps, various pregnancy trackers, and many VPN apps, which some users may download, ironically, in an attempt to protect their privacy. There is a full searchable Google Sheet linked in the article. Definitely check that out if you're interested. I took a look. I did a Control F for a couple of apps that I've used in the past. Not good. And then actually, real quick, just this morning, I actually published a blog post about ad blocking. And the Electronic Frontier Foundation was one of the sources I cited to explain real-time bidding. So I want to quote them because they did it really well. Real-time bidding is the process used to select the targeted ads shown to you on nearly every website and app you visit. The ads you see are the winners of milliseconds-long auctions that expose your personal information to thousands of companies a day. The bid request may contain personal information like your unique advertising ID, location, IP address, device details, interests, and demographic information. A key vulnerability of real-time bidding is that while only one advertiser wins the auction, all participants receive the data. Indeed, anyone posing as an ad buyer can access a stream of sensitive data about the billions of individuals using websites or apps with targeted ads. Real-time bidding, I feel like, is something that is only just now starting to get widely talked about. I actually asked Kerry Parker from Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons when I was writing that blog post. He's covered it at least as far back as 2021. I've mentioned it several times, but Byron Tao's book, Means of Control, pretty much exclusively focuses on Gravy Analytics, and I think there's like another couple of companies, and real-time bidding and how they get this data. I think there's a few takeaways here. First of all, ad blocking is hugely helpful. We're huge fans of it, whether you're doing it with DNS, whether you're doing it with something like AdGuard, which I think is still DNS-based, or Blockade, I know is another really popular one. It's not just about making the internet more tolerable, although that's a big part of it. It's also about protecting yourself from tracking and privacy stuff. Changing settings. Again, Byron Tao, towards the end of his book, he mentions that in Apple, there's a setting to turn off app tracking transparency or turn on app tracking transparency. And when he refused to let apps track him, he hit up one of his contacts who works for one of these companies. They said they couldn't find him. And I mean, obviously your mileage will vary depending on the apps, depending on other companies. But I mean, that's a pretty good indicator that this stuff at very least reduces the amount of tracking, and it certainly couldn't hurt. I think the last thought I want to add on that is I just want to recognize, as people who make a small portion of our money from ads, I think it's fair to point out that the internet is not free. Servers cost money, bandwidth costs money, the time to develop an app or a service costs money, the time to keep it running and updated, etc. So we are huge fans of ad blocking, but especially if there's websites or apps that you use a lot, I would encourage you to go ahead and look into ways to reimburse those ones that you use a lot, whether that's Patreon or paid subscription or, something like that. I can't really impress upon you guys how big of a deal this is without just repeating myself ad nauseum. But seriously, you should go take a look at that list of apps. It's completely insane. Just FYI for listeners, Henry and I just had a discussion. One thing that may not have come through when I was reading this is a vulnerability in the advertising stack. Like, this is not a separate SDK or an analytics like Google Analytics or something like that. This is the way that real-time bidding works is basically any company such as, and I'm not saying this is the case here, the article didn't confirm it, but like Gravy Analytics could set up a shell company that all they do is run ads. And because, like that little EFF quote that I just read off, because when they're bidding for ads, they get access to a ton of data. They don't even care if they get the ad spot or not. They want the data. So now they can collect that data. And then whether it's Gravy or somebody else could sell that data to Gravy. Gravy could sell that to the IRS or whoever. So yeah, it's important to realize this is something that's embedded into the way that ads work on the internet.
Yeah, and then I had a list of ways to try to avoid this problem. The first one is web apps are always king, and it's something we're always big proponents for. It adds a bit of separation from your operating system. You also have a bit more control over things that are contacted. It's really hard to get control over domains contacted within an app, but in a web browser, if you have an ad blocker installed or any kind of extension that tries to deal with these analytics companies, it's going to be a big help. If you are installing apps on your phone, just vet them properly. Always lean towards open source apps. They're a lot less likely to have this stuff in there. Also, we don't know exactly how they're collecting this data, but disabling permissions, don't give location services to your apps that don't need it. And if you do have to have an app, like let's say you use MyFitnessPal or you use Tinder or Grindr, if it has a web app, try to use it on desktop. I don't know about Grindr, but I know Tinder and MyFitnessPal can be used on the web. So just don't use them on your phone, use them on your computer. It might be more inconvenient, but then you're safer as a result. And Brendan Ike from Brave actually mentioned that this specific issue could have at least been helped by using Brave VPN. Of course, he runs Brave. Brave VPN is running through Guardian VPN. It's nothing proprietary, so he's trying to sell his own thing. But what he's saying could still be true, and that the DNS filtering that's used by Brave VPN could actually help in this problem in terms of how domains are contacted. Not necessarily evidence-based, because Nate and I were discussing how that could happen based on how this is working. But it's one of those things that wouldn't hurt. And DNS filtering is a massive band-aid solution. It doesn't actually deal with any root problems, but it can still help. So those are kind of the tips I have for people.
Shout out, The New Oil does have a video about PWAs that's pretty recent, so you can find that on our channel.
And now data breaches, and it's completely tied to our highlight story because hackers have claimed a massive breach of Gravy Analytics. This just gives context into how the data was likely leaked. Pretty much, they compromised Gravy Analytics, and they said that they stole a massive amount of data, including customer lists, information on the broader industry, and even location data harvested from smartphones, which show people's precise movements. Yeah, essentially, they just collected a ton of data on people, nothing more that we haven't already covered. And the hackers had access to Gravy's infrastructure, including root access to their associated server, control over Gravy's domains, and access to Amazon S3 buckets, which are often used to store massive amounts of data. And the hackers have claimed to have access since 2018.
PowerSchool hack exposes student-teacher data from K through 12 districts, which means kindergarten through high school, or I believe they call that college in Europe. PowerSchool is a cloud-based software solutions provider for K through 12 schools and districts that supports over 60 million students and over 18,000 customers worldwide. The company offers a full range of services to help school districts operate, including platforms for enrollment, communication, attendance, staff management, learning systems, analytics, and finance. PowerSchool has confirmed that the stolen data primarily contains contact details, such as names and addresses. However, for some districts, it could also include social security numbers, personally identifiable information, medical information, and grades. The company also stressed that not all PowerSchool SIS customers were impacted and that they anticipate only a subset of customers will have to issue notifications. In an unusually transparent FAQ only accessible to customers, PowerSchool also informed that this was not a ransomware attack, but that they did pay a ransom to prevent the data from being released.
And UN Aviation Agency confirms hacker breached recruitment database to access thousands of records. And this is ICAO, who said that this compromised data includes information including job applicants' names, emails, date of births, and employment history. The affected data does not include financial information, passwords, passport details, or any documents uploaded by applicants.
Because we had a lot of data breaches this week, we're just going to read the headlines. And again, there are links to each article in the show notes, so please go ahead and check those out if you want to learn more. The first one says, online gift card store exposed hundreds of thousands of people's identity documents. I believe it was like mygiftcards.com or something like that. So check that out if you bought a gift card online recently. Casio says data of 8,500 people exposed in October ransomware attack. I think this one's an update. I believe we covered that attack, but we probably just didn't have information on like how many people were affected and what was affected. And medical billing firm Medusend discloses data breach affecting 360,000 people.
And the last three, the largest U.S. addiction treatment provider notifies patients of data breach. Do you have the company?
Baymark Health Services.
And then the cannabis company Stizzy says hackers access customers' ID documents. Telefonica confirms internal ticketing system breach after a data leak as well. And that wraps up the data breaches of the week. If you want more information on any of those, they are in the show notes.
Okie doke, that'll take us into the company section. Apple auto-opts everyone into having their photos analyzed by AI for landmarks. The feature, known as Enhanced Visual Search, was called out last week by software developer Jeff Johnson, who expressed concern in 2 write-ups about Apple's failure to explain the technology, which is believed to have arrived with iOS 18.1 and macOS 15.1 on October 28, 2024. In a policy document dated November 18, 2024, which the article notes, if you check the Wayback Machine, it actually doesn't show up until later. So it's almost like they backdated this update or something. Anyways, Apple describes the feature like this. Enhanced Visual Search in Photos allows you to search for photos using landmarks or points of interest. Your device privately matches places in your photos to a global index Apple maintains on our servers. We apply homomorphic encryption and differential privacy and only use an OHTTP relay that hides your IP address. This prevents Apple from learning about the information in your photos. You can turn off enhanced visual search at any time on your iOS or iPad OS device by going to Settings, Apps, Photos. On Mac, open Photos and go to Settings, General. Put more simply, you take a photo, your Mac or iThing locally outlines what it thinks is a landmark or place of interest in the snap. It homomorphically encrypts a representation of that portion of the image in a way that can be analyzed without being decrypted. It sends the encrypted data to a remote server to do that analysis, so the landmark can be identified from a big database of places, and it receives the suggested location, again in encrypted form, that it alone can decipher. If all works as claimed and there is no side channel or other leaks, Apple can't see what's in your photos, neither the image data nor the looked up label.
Bench customers are now being forced to hand over their data or risk losing it. So this is a startup Bench, which abruptly shut down on December 27th and was bought in a fire sale by employer.com. And they're now learning they can't easily just take their financial data and leave. So one Bench customer told TechCrunch that when he tried to get his records for 2 out of the 5 years that he was a Bench customer, he was asked to hit a consent button. And within the text of that page, they said, if you consent, then you agree to no refunds. And I think that was a very slimy, low thing to do. That's what they said. The company then later changed the page to remove mention of not being able to get a refund. The customer said he was able to contact his credit card company and get a refund for 2 years of service he had prepaid for, but he was still unhappy with the treatment. Another customer said that they showed him a message on Bench offering the user a choice to either continue service and accept updated terms or discontinue service and download data. He chose the latter, and a few days later, they got a message that said that in order to export your data, you have to accept the terms. In this case, they hit accept just to continue and deal with the general issue, but it's suspicious to force the users to do this in order to transfer out their data. Accepting these terms opted me into continuing to use the Bench services. Someone else did the same thing where they had to update terms, and they said that they concealed the fact that this new acknowledgement is the same as the previous consent, and it is backed up by a privacy policy that's not adequate for the financial services that Bench.com provides. She went on to describe Employer.com's privacy policy as laughable. The policy has absolutely nothing to do with safeguarding financial data, and when I tried to email legal at Employer.com about this woefully inadequate policy, I received a bounce back message.
That'll take us into the research section. And we only have one story this week. The headline says, researcher turns insecure license plate cameras into open source surveillance tool. This article focused mainly on a certain brand of Motorola cameras, license plate readers specifically, but I think it probably applies to other things. Quoting the article, some Motorola automated license plate reader surveillance cameras are live streaming video and card data to the unsecured internet where anyone can watch and scrape them, a researcher has found. In a proof of concept, a privacy advocate then developed a tool that automatically scans the exposed footage for license plates and dumps that information into a spreadsheet, allowing someone to track the movements of others in real times. The streams can be watched without any sort of login. This comes from the creator of DFlock. I think we've covered this before, so Flock, for those just joining us, is a company that specializes in automatic license plate readers, and they're everywhere. And anyways, this person made a website called DFlock where it's crowdsourced, I think. People can submit like, hey, I saw a camera here, and it creates a map. So the creator says, I've always thought these things were concerning, but this just goes to show that law enforcement agencies and the companies that provide ALPRs, which is automatic license plate readers, are no different than any other data company and can't be trusted with this information. So when a police department says there's nothing to worry about unless you're a criminal, there definitely is. Here's evidence of a ton of cameras operated by law enforcement freely streaming sensitive data they're collecting on us. My hometown is mostly Motorola, so someone could simply write a script that maps vehicles to times and precise locations. The article goes on to say this is not the first time that ALPRs have been found to be streaming directly to the unsecured internet. In 2015, the Electronic Frontier Foundation and researchers at the University of Arizona found hundreds of exposed ALPR streams. In 2019, an ALPR vendor for the Department of Homeland Security was hacked, and license plates and images of travelers were leaked onto the dark web. Last year, the U.S. government's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, put out a warning saying that Motorola's vigilant ALPR cameras were remotely exploitable.
All right, now we're going to go into the politics section, and the U.S. government is set to launch its Cyber Trust Mark cybersecurity labeling program for internet-connected devices in 2025. So the Biden admin introduced this in June 2023, saying the voluntary labeling program would raise the bar for internet-connected devices, and no exact launch date was given, but the announcement states that companies will soon be able to submit their products to one of 11 companies approved for testing to earn the label, with plans for certified products to hit store shelves in 2025. The Biden admin was also finalizing an executive order that would require the U.S. government to only buy products certified with this mark starting in 2027. Products that meet this mark must comply with a set of cybersecurity standards developed by NIST, including what the White House described in 2023 as unique and strong default passwords, data protection, software updates, and incident detection capabilities.
This next one is just kind of an update from India. It says Cloudflare's VPN app among half dozen pulled from Indian app stores. Among the affected apps are Hide.me and Privado VPN. In a communication to one of the affected developers, Apple cited a, quote, demand from the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, part of the Ministry of Home Affairs, which deemed the developer content to contravene Indian law. This enforcement action marks the first significant implementation of India's 2022 regulatory framework governing VPN apps. The rules mandate that VPN providers and cloud service operators maintain comprehensive records of their customers, including names, addresses, IP addresses, and transaction histories for a 5-year period. The stringent requirements prompted pushback from major industry players. Leading brands like Nord, Express, Surfshark, and Proton voiced significant reservations about the rules, with several announcing plans to withdraw their server infrastructure from India. Nord, Express, and Surfshark continue to maintain services for Indian customers, though they have stopped marketing their apps in the country.
Washington sues T-Mobile over that 2021 data breach that spilled 79 million customer records. So we definitely covered that one back in the day. And in a statement announcing the lawsuit, Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson said that T-Mobile knew for years about these vulnerabilities and didn't do enough to address them. The suit seeks financial damages under the state's consumer protection laws and to order T-Mobile to improve its cybersecurity policies. The hack was the latest in a series of data breaches at the company over recent years, with at least 5 security incidents dating back to 2018. The breach allowed a hacker access to T-Mobile systems and exfiltrated customer names, dates of birth, and social security numbers, as well as driver's license information. Some of the stolen data was subsequently published on a known cyber criminal forum. They also accused T-Mobile of not giving adequate notice, and because of that notice, customers weren't able to assess the risk of identity theft or fraud.
Google loses in court, faces trial for collecting data on users who opted out. A federal judge this week rejected Google's motion to throw out a class action lawsuit alleging that it invaded the privacy of users who opted out of functionality that records a user's web and app activities. A jury trial is selected for August 2025 in U.S. District Court in San Francisco. The lawsuit concerns Google's web and app activity, WAA settings, with the lead plaintiff representing 2 subclasses of people with Android and non-Android phones who opted out of tracking. The judge said the WAA button is a Google account setting that purports to give users privacy control of Google's data logging of the user's web app and activity, such as a user's searches and activity from other Google services, information associated with the user's activity, and information about the user's location and device. But data is still sent to third-party app developers through the Google Analytics for Firebase, a, quote, free analytical tool that takes user data from the Firebase kit and provides app developers with insight on app usage and user engagement, unquote. Firebase is integrated into 60% of the top apps and works automatically by sending to Google a user's ad interactions and certain identifiers regardless of a user's WAA settings, and Google will in turn provide analysis of that data back to the app developer.
Rumble among 15 targets of the Texas Attorney General's child privacy probe. So Rumble, Quora, and WeChat are among these 15 companies from which Texas has demanded answers by next week about their collection and use of data of people under 18 years old. Paxton announced the investigation in a press release last month, but named only 4 of the companies being probed, which is Character AI, Reddit, Instagram, and Discord. Wired obtained the names of additional targeted companies through a public records request, which includes Kik, different from Kik, like one is Kik spelled normally and one is Kik spelled with K-I-K, Pinterest, Telegram, Twitch, Tumblr, WhatsApp, and Whisper. 3 experts in youth privacy regulations who have been following Paxton's enforcement efforts say the new investigation should be treated credibly, and they believe it could result in companies agreeing to improve their practices. The alternative could be up to hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties per company.
An EU court finds European Commission for breaching its own data privacy laws. A top court has ordered the European Union's top executive authority to pay €400, which is around $410 in damages, to a German citizen for breaching its own data protection laws. The court said the German citizen registered for a conference managed by the European Commission using the sign-in with Facebook option on the conference's website. But the citizen said the information about his IP address, browser, and device were transferred to companies in the United States, namely Amazon, which hosts the conference website, and Meta, which owns Facebook, which the citizen said violated his rights under the bloc's data privacy rules.
Quick update here from a previous story. Chinese hackers also breached Charter and Windstream networks. So more US companies have been added to the list of telecommunications firms hacked in that wave of breaches by a Chinese state-backed threat group tracked as Salt Typhoon. Context, this is the one that was in like Verizon's network, AT&T's network, pretty much every major company. And for at least a week or two, they were saying, yeah, we don't really know how to get rid of them. And they did finally seem to kick them off. At least most companies, when we covered it, I think last week, most companies said that they dealt with it. But the Chinese hackers have also breached the systems of Charter Communications, Consolidated Communications, and Windstream as well. While the White House told reporters on December 27th that the Chinese hackers breached 9 of these telecoms, it's unknown whether these 3 carriers are among them or add to the list.
That'll take us into the free and open source news section, and some of you may have been affected by this one. Proton worldwide outage caused by Kubernetes migration. I don't know how that's pronounced. Kubernetes? But it was caused by a migration and software change. So Swiss tech company Proton, which provides privacy-focused online services, says that a Thursday worldwide outage was caused by an ongoing infrastructure migration to Kubernetes and a software change that triggered an initial load spike. Proton users reported that they couldn't connect to their Proton VPN, Proton Mail, Calendar, Drive, Pass, and Wallet accounts. The issues were fully resolved within about 2 hours. For those services, during the incident, approximately 50% of requests failed, leading to intermittent service unavailability for some users. The service would look to be alternating between up and down from minute to minute. While Proton would have had enough extra capacity to handle all the new connections, an ongoing migration, which required running, quote, 2 parallel infrastructures at the same time, unquote, made it impossible to balance the load. Proton says it has since resolved all connection issues affecting its online services and is currently monitoring for additional issues, even though the situation has been stable for some time.
And quick update from Molvad. Quantum-resistant tunnels are now the default on desktop. So this is their new release, and it enables the quantum-resistant WireGuard tunnels by default on Windows. If you want to see this in your client, there is a visual indicator in the app, and instructions on how to enable this, if not already enabled, are in the article. They also hope to enable this by default on iOS and Android in the future, once they are sure that it works well. One actual little tiny final story, Entei Auth got a pretty cool update. It's the TOTP app. They got a new icon picker. You can now do custom ordering. There's a new HTML export and also keyboard shortcuts.
And that'll take us into Misfits. We have just a couple of quick stories, but they are important stories, so stay tuned. First up, violent hackers are using U-Haul to dox targets. U-Haul, for those who don't know, they're somewhere you can go rent moving trucks or trailers. You know, you get a little trailer, hook it up to your car, you can pack up your room and drive to your new home. U-Haul has lots of information and it can be used for all sorts of stuff. One of the primary cases is for doxing targets, since they seem to have information not found online. And of course, U-Haul has confirmed this info with the person prior. And this comes from the administrator of a phishing tool, which advertises the ability to harvest U-Haul logins. And this whole thing comes from an article by 404 Media. The tool is called Suite, and it also advertises phishing pages for Gmail, Coinbase, and major US carriers T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. Specifically, the administrator said that the U-Haul phishing page is a clone of the official point of sale login, which is used by U-Haul workers. Once inside, attackers can look up customer info from an email, and it gives back their name, address, phone number, and last 4 of billing. This information can then be used to socially engineer access to major ISP emails like Comcast.
Last story, all you American football fans better watch out here, because the Green Bay Packers online store hacked to steal credit cards. And even if you're not a Green Bay Packers fan, could be you next. So they're notifying fans that a threat actor hacked its official online retail store in October and injected a card skimmer script to steal customers' personal and payment information. The investigation revealed that the malicious code inserted in the checkout page could steal personal and payment information between late September and early October 2024. And the Packers say the attacker couldn't intercept information from payments made using a gift card, ProShop website account, PayPal, or Amazon Pay. Personal and payment data impacted in the breach includes information entered on the ProShop website when making a purchase, such as names, addresses, email addresses, as well as credit card types, numbers, expiration dates, and verification numbers. The Packers have yet to share the number of customers impacted by this data breach or how the threat actor could hack into its ProShop website to inject the card skimmer script.
That's all we have for the week. So thousands of apps are spying on you, and now we have a little bit more insight into how that works and hopefully how we can help defend ourselves. So definitely be proactive about that. We can't undo the damage from our past mistakes, but we can do better going forward. Apple automatically opted users into AI analysis. Not the worst execution, but definitely not cool of them to not tell people and be transparent, so go ahead and shut that off if you're uncomfortable. And Proton had a major outage. Hopefully it is now over, and the Proton users have access to their tools again, and much, much more. So as always, stay subscribed, and we will definitely have updates to some of these stories down the road. Also, you get more information. If you're like me, you heard about this outage, and you were just like, wonder what happened there, and now you know. So all the more reason to be a regular listener. A friendly reminder that if you get value out of this podcast and you want to keep us going, your contributions help us keep the lights on. We have Patreon. For $5 a month, you get to join our Q&A, which will be coming out in the middle of the week. And you also get access to our Signal group chat with other fans of the show, really smart people with a lot of different tips, tools, ideas, really good discussions going on in there all the time. If you join at $10 a month or more, you get the ad-free version of this podcast where we have a lot more analysis, back and forth, stuff like that. So if you want more than just like the article and you're like, well, I could have went and read that myself, then you probably want the $10 version. If you want something recurring and you don't really care about the perks, LibrePay is probably the way to go. It's a little bit more privacy respecting. And then, of course, if you want the maximum amount of privacy and security, we have Monero. But again, reminder, if you want to join the Q&A but you don't want to sign up for Patreon, we do have XMR Chat. And that allows you to go ahead and leave a question, but also send us a tip in Monero. And so far, that has been a huge success. So thank you guys who have been using that. We really appreciate you guys. So thank you again for listening. Links to all of the stories can be found in the show notes if there's anything you want to read more about or send an article to somebody. If you have a story that you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. And the last thing we want to ask of you is to please share the podcast around. Again, we do not do any traditional marketing. We don't pay for ads. We don't pay for sponsor spots on other podcasts or anything like that. We entirely rely on you guys and a little bit on the YouTube algorithm to spread the podcast around. Make sure you are subscribed. Give us a rating if you're on a platform where that's an option. That is hugely helpful. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with the message of privacy, and every little thing helps. So thank you again for listening, and we'll be back next week.